My mother-in-law insisted I call her mommy or she'd disown my husband. You need to prove you love this family, she sneered. My husband agreed, it's a small request. Disgusted, I refused, and she filed a restraining order against me. But when the judge read the secret evidence I brought to court, she collapsed in shock. I should have known from the start. I should have seen the signs. There were so many signs. My husband, Mark, and I had been together for 4 years before we got married. And in those 4 years, his mother, Margaret, made it very clear that she did not like me. Not because I had ever done anything wrong, but because I was competition. Margaret was the type of woman who needed control. She ran her household like she was queen of the kingdom, and Mark was her loyal subject. He worshipped her. He never made a single decision without asking for her approval first. I thought it was just a close mother-son bond at first. A little odd, maybe, but not something I needed to worry about. I was so wrong. Margaret's dislike for me started off as subtle jabs. She would make little comments about my hair, my clothes, my job. Oh, you're wearing that? Wow, your apartment is so cozy. Mark deserves more space. Your job seems exhausting. Mark needs a wife who can focus on family. I ignored it. I figured she was just being passive-aggressive, but I didn't want to cause drama. I wanted to be the bigger person. Then she started testing my patience. She would do little things to push my boundaries. She would call Mark and tell him I was too independent and that she was worried about our future. She would book vacations for Mark without asking me. She would even try to control our wedding planning. I already spoke to the florist. You don't want roses. You want lilies. The guest list is too small. I invited some of my friends. You don't mind, right? You should wear my old wedding dress. It's a family tradition. Mark never saw a problem. She's just excited, he'd say. It's not a big deal. Every time I brought it up, he dismissed it. He said I was overreacting. I started to think maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was being too sensitive. So, I let it go. After we got married, Margaret suddenly started acting different. She went from cold and passive-aggressive to fake sweet. She would hold my hands when she spoke to me. She would compliment me out of nowhere. You're such a sweet girl, I just knew you were meant to be part of this family. I didn't buy it. Then, one day, she made a request. Now that you're my daughter-in-law, I think you should start calling me mommy. I laughed. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She looked dead serious. It's a sign of respect, she said. All the women in this family do it. I felt sick. Mark, who had been quiet this whole time, agreed with her. It's not a big deal, he said. She just wants to feel like you really love her. I said no. Margaret's face went blank. She didn't argue. She just stared at me for a long moment, then smiled. If you refuse, I will disown Mark. I will take him out of my will. I will tell the family you don't respect us. I looked at Mark, expecting him to stand up for me. He didn't. He just sighed and said, just do it, babe. It's not a big deal. I refused again. Margaret didn't scream. She didn't curse. She just took a deep breath, stood up, and left the room. Something in my gut told me this wasn't over. A week later, my phone started blowing up. Mark's relatives were furious with me. His aunts, his cousins, even his grandmother were sending me angry messages. How could you disrespect Margaret like this? You're tearing the family apart. We welcomed you in, and you spit in our faces. Margaret had called every single person in the family and told them I was rude, disrespectful, and cruel. She said I refused to see her as family and that I was turning Mark against her. Some people believed her. Some didn't. But Mark? Mark took her side. You should apologize, he told me. She's really hurt. She was crying on the phone with me all night. I told him she was manipulating him. He refused to hear it. That's when I started to see it clearly. Margaret wasn't just trying to control Mark, she was trying to control me, too. And Mark? He was letting her. I was already exhausted from the family drama. I thought Margaret had done the worst she could do. I was wrong. One morning, I opened the door to find a police officer standing outside. I had been served. Margaret had filed a restraining order against me. In the report, she claimed I had screamed at her, thrown things at her, and even threatened her life. She said she was terrified of me. It was all lies. I called Mark in a panic. He didn't sound shocked. She just needs space, he said. You should have just called her mommy. That was it. That was the moment I knew. This man, my husband, was never going to choose me over her. And Margaret? She was willing to ruin my life just to get what she wanted. A restraining order would go on my record. It could affect my job, my future, everything. I wasn't going to let her win. I needed proof. Margaret had always been careful around me. But she wasn't careful around her own family. And I had one person on my side. Margaret's own sister, Aunt Diane. Diane had hated Margaret for years. She knew how manipulative she was. And she had receipts. She had text messages from Margaret bragging about how she was going to teach me a lesson. She had emails where Margaret detailed her entire plan to frame me. But the best part? Margaret had accidentally left a voicemail on Diane's phone. A voicemail where she admitted the whole thing. She laughed and said, "Don't worry, sis. It's not like she can prove it. And Mark's too stupid to question it." I finally had what I needed. Now, it was time for court. I walked into that courtroom with my head high, but my hands were shaking. I wasn't just fighting for my reputation, I was fighting for my future. Margaret was already seated, wearing a pale blue dress, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She had a perfectly rehearsed expression on her face, wide, teary eyes, the slight trembling of her lower lip. She was playing the victim. Mark sat beside her. He didn't even look at me. I took my seat, gripping my lawyer's arm so hard that my nails dug into his suit. The judge walked in. And the battle began. Margaret's lawyer spoke first. My client, a kind and loving mother, has been living in fear for months. She sniffled, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. She welcomed her daughter-in-law with open arms, only to be met with hostility, aggression, and threats of violence. I could feel my blood boiling. The lawyer continued. She has suffered emotional distress, sleepless nights, and anxiety so severe that she has sought therapy. Margaret nodded weakly, as if she barely had the strength to sit up straight. Then the lawyer delivered the worst part. We have a witness to support these claims, her son, Mark. I froze. I knew Mark had taken her side, but I never thought he would testify against me. Mark took the stand. I watched him adjust his tie, his nervous habit. But then he straightened his back and lied through his teeth. I love my wife, he said. But I can't ignore what I saw. Saw? What the hell was he talking about? She's been struggling with anger issues, he said, his voice soft and concerned. I tried to help her, but she would lash out. She even threw a glass once. It shattered right near my mom's feet. I clenched my fists under the table. I had never done that. Margaret sat quietly, nodding like she was heartbroken but not surprised. I could feel my stomach twisting. This was worse than I thought. Then, Margaret's lawyer did something I wasn't expecting. He pulled out a printed document and handed it to the judge. Your Honor, these are text messages from the defendant to my client. I blinked. Text messages? The judge skimmed through them, then frowned. Miss, my last name, did you send these? I grabbed the papers and felt my heart drop. It was a conversation, one I had never had. Messages like, "You're ruining my marriage, you bitter old hag. If you don't stop interfering, you'll regret it. Mark is mine. Stay out of our lives or else." I felt like I couldn't breathe. Margaret had faked text messages. I looked at Mark, expecting to see hesitation in his face. Maybe guilt. There was none. He believed this. I could feel my lawyer tense beside me. He whispered, "Stay calm." But how was I supposed to stay calm when my own husband was helping frame me? The judge turned to me. Miss, my last name, do you have a response to these accusations? I swallowed. Then, I pulled out my own evidence. Your Honor, I said, my voice steady, I would like to submit a voicemail recording as evidence. Margaret stiffened. For the first time, she looked nervous. I glanced at Mark. He wasn't nervous at all. He looked annoyed, like I was just wasting everyone's time. But when my lawyer played the recording, the mood in the courtroom shifted. Margaret's own voice filled the room. Don't worry, sis. It's not like she can prove it. And Mark's too stupid to question it. Margaret went pale. The judge's eyes narrowed. Mark sat frozen, his mouth slightly open. But before anyone could speak, something even crazier happened. Margaret stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. She wasn't crying anymore. She wasn't acting weak. She was furious. "You little brat," she hissed at me. "You've ruined everything." She turned on Mark. "You were supposed to be on my side." Mark flinched. The courtroom was silent. I watched the judge's face harden. This wasn't just a family fight anymore. Margaret had just exposed herself, and she knew it. For the first time, I saw doubt on Mark's face. He turned to his mother. "Mom, what are you doing?" Margaret realized her mistake. She tried to recover, forcing tears back into her voice. "Sweetheart, you know she's manipulating this, you lied to me?" Mark snapped. I had never heard him raise his voice at her before. Margaret looked at him, horrified. "I did this for you," she said. Mark turned to me. For the first time, his confidence was gone. "Did you really shut up?" I cut him off. I had no patience left. Mark opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Margaret collapsed into her seat, gasping for air. The courtroom exploded. Someone screamed. A guard rushed forward. Margaret clutched her chest, shaking. And as she struggled for breath, I realized something. She wasn't just acting this time. Her body was betraying her. And suddenly, this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was life or death. Margaret clutched her chest, her fingers trembling. The judge signaled for a bailiff to step forward, but before anyone could do anything, Margaret gasped, I can't breathe." I sat frozen, watching as she collapsed forward onto the table. For a brief moment, I thought it was another act. Another dramatic display to distract from what had just happened. But then I saw her face. Her skin had turned an alarming shade of gray. Her lips quivered, her hands grasping at her throat like she was trying to claw the air into her lungs. Mark panicked. He jumped from his seat. Mom, what's happening?" I didn't move. I just stared. I wanted to feel something. Maybe concern, maybe fear, maybe even pity. But all I felt was cold. This was her moment, the grand, dramatic finale she had always wanted. Someone called 911. A woman in the back of the courtroom screamed. The bailiff ran forward, calling for help, and for the first time since this nightmare started, I saw true panic on Margaret's face. Not manipulation. Not anger. Just fear. The paramedics burst into the courtroom 3 minutes later. They rushed to her side, checking her pulse, shining a small flashlight into her dilated pupils. One of them turned to Mark. "Does she have any medical conditions?" Mark stammered. She has anxiety?" The paramedic didn't even look up. "Any heart conditions?" Mark hesitated. "No. I don't think so," that was all I needed to hear. Because Margaret did have a heart condition. I had overheard her talking about it months ago, complaining about how she had to take some medication every morning, about how she hated that it made her feel old. But Mark? Her precious, devoted son? He didn't even know. And somehow, that was funnier than anything else. Just when I thought things couldn't get stranger, one of the paramedics checked her wrist and froze. "Wait a second." She looked up at her partner, then at the judge. "We need to check something right now." Margaret was too weak to speak, but her eyes flickered with confusion. The courtroom watched in silence as the paramedic pulled out a small device, one I recognized immediately. A blood sugar monitor. The paramedic pricked Margaret's finger, took a reading, and then her expression completely changed. "Her blood sugar is dangerously low," she said. Mark blinked. "What?" "She's not diabetic." The paramedic frowned. "Then why does she have an insulin overdose in her system?" The courtroom erupted. The judge pounded his gavel, demanding silence. I just sat there, staring, my mind racing. Insulin overdose? Margaret wasn't diabetic. So why was there insulin in her system? The answer hit me like a freight train. Someone had poisoned her. Mark turned to me, his face filled with sudden suspicion. "Did you do this?" he whispered. I scoffed. "Are you serious?" I hadn't even been near her. I hadn't touched her food, her drinks, nothing. But someone had. And then my eyes landed on the only other person who had the most to gain from her downfall. Aunt Diane. She was sitting calmly in the back row of the courtroom, watching everything unfold. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't panicking. She looked satisfied. like she had been waiting for this moment. Our eyes met. She smiled. Not a full smile. Just the slightest twitch of her lips. And in that moment, I knew. Margaret had always been a manipulator. But Diane? Diane was playing a longer game. I remembered all the times she had fed me information about Margaret. All the evidence she had magically collected. All the old grudges between them. I had thought she was helping me. But now, I wasn't sure. Because now, Margaret, the woman she had hated for decades, was suddenly on the verge of death. And Diane? She was just watching. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just sat there, letting it sink in. Margaret was fighting for her life. Mark was breaking down. And Diane? She had just won a game none of us knew we were playing. And for the first time in this entire nightmare, I wasn't sure who the real villain was anymore. Margaret was rushed out of the courtroom on a stretcher, the paramedics shouting medical terms I didn't understand. Mark ran after them like a lost puppy, his voice rising in panic as he called for his mother. The judge banged the gavel, trying to regain order. But it was useless, the room had turned into chaos. My hands were shaking. Not because I was scared. Not because I felt sorry for Margaret. Because something wasn't adding up. Diane. She hadn't moved from her seat. She sat perfectly still, watching the scene unfold like it was a movie she had already seen before. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just some sudden medical emergency. This was planned. By someone who hated Margaret even more than I did. And for the first time, I realized that I was never the one in control of this fight. Diane was. The courtroom emptied quickly. Everyone followed Margaret and the paramedics, everyone except Diane. I stayed too. She knew I would. We sat in silence. Then, she finally turned to me, her expression calm. You figured it out, she said, almost amused. I swallowed. You did this, I said. You poisoned her. Diane didn't deny it. She just let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. Oh, sweetheart, she sighed. Do you really think I'd be stupid enough to do something so reckless? I didn't know what to say. Because she was right. Diane wasn't sloppy. Diane wasn't impulsive. But Margaret? Margaret was paranoid. And what if Diane had planted a seed? What if she had been feeding Margaret's fears for months? What if Margaret had been drugging herself, thinking she was protecting herself from me? I thought about all the times Diane had been so willing to help me. How she had been so eager to show me all the ways Margaret had tried to ruin me. How she had been so insistent on dragging Margaret to court. Had I been played? Had I just been a pawn in a much bigger game? Diane tilted her head. Don't look so upset, dear, she said, her voice light. She was going to destroy you first. I just made sure she didn't get the chance. I stood up. You used me. Diane smirked. Oh, come on. You got what you wanted, didn't you? You're free of her now. I felt sick. Because she was right. Margaret was done. Even if she survived, she had been caught in too many lies. The court would never take her side now. Mark had seen her true colors. Her entire family had. Her empire of control had just collapsed around her. And Diane? Diane had won. I had thought Margaret was the master manipulator. I had thought Mark was weak. But Diane had been the one pulling the strings the whole time. An hour later, I found Mark outside the hospital. He was sitting on a bench, his head in his hands. I had never seen him like this before. He had always been so sure of himself, so convinced that his mother was this perfect, untouchable figure. But now, he looked like a man who had just realized his entire life was a lie. He didn't even look up when I sat next to him. She's gonna be okay, he muttered. I nodded. Yeah. Silence. Then, finally, he turned to me. His eyes were bloodshot. She lied to me, he whispered. She tried to ruin you. And I just let her. I didn't say anything. Because what was I supposed to say? I'm sorry. His voice cracked. I let out a bitter laugh. That's it? I said. That's all you have to say? Mark swallowed hard. I should have believed you. I stared at him. For so long, I had wanted to hear those words. I had wanted him to wake up. But now? Now it was too late. He had already made his choice. I stood up. I'm leaving, I said. Mark blinked, like the words hadn't fully registered. Wait, what do you mean? I mean I'm done. His face crumpled. No, you can't, Mark. I sighed, shaking my head. You didn't just choose her over me. You helped her destroy me. You let her drag my name through the mud, and you didn't even question it. But I see it now, he said, desperate. I see what she did. I see how messed up it was. And what? I snapped. You want a medal? You think that suddenly makes it all okay? He didn't answer. Because he knew the truth. There was nothing left to save. I filed for divorce the next day. Mark tried to fight it. He tried to apologize. He tried to explain. But I was done listening. Margaret survived. She left the hospital a week later, but her reputation was ruined. Her family cut ties. She tried reaching out to Mark. He ignored her calls. Diane? Diane never faced consequences. She played her role too well. She was the concerned sister. The wise family member who had just wanted to help. And me? I walked away. I walked away from all of it. From Mark. From Margaret. From a family war I never should have been dragged into. And for the first time in years, I felt something I thought I had lost forever. Freedom.